draw everything that I published.
So you did everything, right? And draw.
I wrote, drew, lettered. I even colored for a little bit. My own work, not anyone else's. Um, and so I originally wanted to get into history and writing. So when I first started writing back in 1994, it was only because I didn't know any writers, and I needed scripts. This is really early days internet, so not like I could go on digital webbing and find
Right.
a writer to work with. I did find a couple local writers through my comic shop. I was living in Kelowna, which is more west coast of Canada, and I met a couple writers through there, but they weren't very good, and they
Sure.
were kind of jerks. They
Okay.
were like it was like the worst combination, like overly confident. I need some talent to back it up, and I knew that I could write at least just as well as they could, and I figured, why deal with someone else and their ego? Why not just write myself? So I started writing initially out of necessity. So back in 1994, I would write and draw stuff, and I would run off like mini comics to a
Sure.
local a place called Ditto's, which is kind of a Kinko's proxy.
Okay.
In Kelowna. I would just sell them at record shops and on my backpack. And I did that, like I said, for a good 14 years. And then, yeah, in 2010, with Murder Book, I realized I actually hated drawing.
Sure.
Even though that's what I originally wanted to do. I'd gone to fine arts and everything, so
Right.
I'd become an artist. I actually, the process of drawing frustrates me so much, and I found that I was getting ahead of myself in my head with script, and I found uh, that was more my interest was in writing. And so with Murder Book was where I stopped drawing and decided just to focus on writing.
So let's rewind a little bit for Murder Book.
Sure.
What was your introduction to a comic book? Like, what was the first time you had a comic book in your hand and you were like, okay, this is cool. I'm into this.
I've tried to remember what the first comics I had were, and I'm not 100% sure what they were because I found as a kid they were kind of always around.
Right.
So it was either when I was in the hospital, when I was about 8, a little younger maybe.
Okay.
I had like a lot of health problems when I was younger, and this time I think it was just I had my tonsils taken out, but there were some other issues. So I was in the hospital for 4 or 5 days, and I think this is during the '80s. It was pretty common to drop off a stack of comic books for kids in the hospital.
Sure.
I remember reading a lot of stuff there. The first comics I remember buying myself were the Peter Porker.
Yeah.
The
Little Spider-Man.
I used to buy a lot of Captain Canuck comics.
Okay.
You guys are familiar with Captain Canuck?
We are familiar with Captain Canuck.
Right. So I had a bunch of those. Just kind of whatever. My mom is a big reader, so every Saturday we would go to a used bookstore and she'd drop us off at the front of the store at the comic bins, and I would buy a bunch of 10-cent comics back then. So a lot of Captain Americas and stuff like that. And that was probably around the time 8 or 9.
Sure.
And usually I would read them for like my mom would take forever in the certain store. She'd be there for 2 hours looking for books.
Right.
I would spend my allowance buying about 10 comic books, and I would have read half of them by the time I was ready.
Awesome. So I mean, at this point, you've worked on. I mean, you're reading my favorite comic currently, New Mutants, with Jonathan Hickman. I have to ask, with some of the characters that you guys brought back to the roster that are in the story, like Beak, for example, when you guys were like kind of plotting that story out, who was like, yeah, we should bring Beak back?
That was me. So Hickman and I, we did the first issue together, and then largely sort of split off, and he's done his issues now.
Right.
He's 3 more issues, and then he's been kind of just let me to do the thing I wanted to do, and then of course we tied back in when the mutants come back to Earth after their little space adventures.
Sure.
So Beak that was me. I have a real attachment to a lot of the X-Men characters,
Sure.
Grant Morrison characters, and so yeah, Beak was always that the such an oddball character.
Yeah,
And
completely.
when I had this story that I wanted to do, yeah, it was just like he seemed him and Angel seemed like the perfect characters for that story.
Sure.
And a little bit of like sort of behind the scenes stuff. We actually had to, because I started writing that, we had to go back and actually patch artwork on one before it came out. Because before I had started, Rod had already started drawing New Mutants 1, and there's a scene where Glob and another character are plucking something out of a tree.
Right.
And originally he drew Beak, but it wasn't Beak in the script.
Right.
He Beak. It was
right.
just random mutants, and he chose Beak. So we actually had to go back and he had to put someone else in there because then I started writing
right.
the story with Beak, and then we saw Zark come in, and we were like, crap.
Yeah.
It was not a huge thing. Rod is great to work with, and was happy to do it.
So
yeah.
So Extermination, that was I'll be honest, that was my favorite X title from what was that, last year, right? Or was it 2018? I'm really, timing has no meaning anymore.
Late 2018.
Late 2018, yeah. So when you first, what was the genesis of that book, where you guys had to do that kind of soft reset, so we did the leading into Uncanny and stuff like that, and then how did you approach like the creation of like Young Cable and things like that?
Well, what had happened is I think Marvel, there's an interest in sort of moving toward fewer duplicate characters.
Sure.
And part of that was the original 5 that were brought into our timeline. That was always, I think, intended to be finite.
Right.
Or to go back at some point. So this is a thing where I think Marvel is interested in sort of sending them back, closing out their story and giving them the end. And the pitch for that actually came out as something originally that I was going to do in Old Man Logan. I had a storyline that I wanted to do that wasn't going to fit in Old Man Logan, and so when they brought up the issue of how to deal with the young X-Men, it fit well. It actually, I had to scale it back a little bit to make it fit for them.
Sure.
But the Young Cable thing kind of came out of, or it was called Kid Cable, came out of a thing where I think the thing that always bothered me is like why Cable's dead set on maintaining the timeline. Why is he letting him stay there? And so I wanted to make it, like, give it a real sort of emotional and personal reason for doing it. That his younger self is not going to have maybe the exact same attachment to
right.
it. And we find out there's other stuff going on later on with Cable fans.
Sure.
And I love Cable, and I think the one thing that we hadn't really seen too much in comics is we have the Grizzly Vet Cable,
right.
But I kind of am interested in seeing like first-year Marine Cable.
Sure, yeah.
Very pragmatic, very black and white.
Sure.
And a very sort of brutal warrior. And like I'll tell you, when I pitched the idea of Kid Cable coming in and killing the older Cable.
Spoiler alert.
It was really divisive in the room. It was, I think, some of the most heated debates that I've seen in the writers' room about it. But I'm happy with the story. I think it was a fun little twist. It's the first time I ever got death threats on Twitter. But, it comes from a place of really liking the character and wanting to just try something new with him and make it interesting.
No, and I mean, well, besides the people, killing you on Twitter, I think he's been kind of a hit so far. I mean, he was in Fallen Angels, and I think generally he's been well received by the X-Men community. I will say, as a fan, when I read that issue, I remember it's like, did they really just kill Cable? Like, is that? And then I was like, no. He body slid or something happened right next to Sylvie, and then when it was like, no, Cable's like really dead, and this is Young Cable. I was like, okay, that was an interesting choice. But I'll be honest, Kid Cable's grown on me a bunch, and I can't wait to see how we use that iteration of the character going forward for a while. Because we had like you said, the grizzled, like Cable from, where he's been through so much, and then now we've got this like new startup, black and white, doesn't really, everything is either black or white. Yeah, I'm really excited to see where that goes from here. Um, so with, I mean, you're all over Marvel, right? You have Old Man Logan, you have New Mutants, Extermination, we just talked about, a bunch of other stuff. Um, but you've done some smaller indie stuff as well. So, for example, at IDW, X Files TMNT, right?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because I'm a fan of both of those properties, but the idea of them together, and I think you did a great job of doing it. But how, like, what was your creative process for that?
They phoned me and asked me if I'd be interested. I had pitched for a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle thing before this, and I can't remember who ended up getting it, but I kept in touch with the editor, and they had hit me up to see if I would be interested in doing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle thing. But they were like, before you agree to it, let's hop on the phone. And so I got on the phone, and they mentioned they wanted to do an X-Files Ninja Turtles crossover. And honestly, my first instinct was, no.
Sure, yeah.
This sounds absurd.
Sure.
But I think there was something about the absurdity in the end that sort of spoke to me.
Yeah.
There's a weird competitive side to me where if I'm presented with something that seems impossible,
right,
that shouldn't work, that I want to find a way to make it work.
Right.
So eventually, I was like, okay, here's a story I think would work, and it's I don't think it's explicitly stated in the comic, but it's actually like a sort of sequel to an X-Files episode.
Yeah.
Called Bad Blood, I believe the episode's called.
Yep.
Which is written and directed by, I think written by Vince Gilligan, who went on to do
Breaking Bad,
and Better Call Saul, about a bunch of blood-sucking pizza delivery.
Yeah.
Drivers, which I thought was a fun premise that would work well with this story.
Did you already have that idea in your head, like, okay, pizza, X-Files, Ninja Turtles, this is all kind of meshing now?
I'd remembered that episode, so after, like, when they offered it to me, I asked to have a day or two to think about it, whether, I wanted to do it. And initially they were a little bit hesitant because they're like, well, we don't want to just go to straight pizza because it's Ninja Turtles.
Sure.
It's right here. It's some beautiful low-hanging fruit that we can fucking play around with. But it was just, I went back and revisited the episode. I hadn't seen it probably in about 10 years, but I remembered it. I hadn't seen it in about 10 years. And it's a really fun episode. And I presented them with an idea that would work. I seemed cool with it, and I wrote it, did it, got to work with Michael Walsh again. Adam Gorham, who actually worked with on The Violent later, came to ink it. So, and Jordy Belair colored, which is, Jordy, Mike, and I did a both comeback.
I think of the crossovers that they were doing at the time with the X-Files, I think yours was the best one, because TMT is great, and I think you guys, like, it's just, there's no way those two things should work, and I think you guys found a way that's like, yes, this shouldn't work, but it does here, right?
Sure, yeah. We just wanted to have fun with it, and I think the fact that we had to use Lone Gunman, Lone Gunman mesh a bit more with the turtle.
Sure.
Mulder and Scully. Felt a bit more.
So now let's jump back to Marvel.
Sure.
You, like I said a little bit ago, you're all over Marvel at this point. You had Old Man Logan. You're working with New Mutants now. Is there any characters or even creators that you haven't had that opportunity to work with that you would like to work with?
Well, I've got one of my bucket list characters was Punisher, but I do have a Punisher versus Barracuda book with Declan Shelby that is coming out at some point. Whenever
the world,
right? The first issue was supposed to come out on April 8th. And obviously it's been delayed.
Sure.
So that was one of my bucket list characters. Daredevil is another one that's up there for me, and obviously Spider-Man is a character that I would love to sink my teeth into. I have a Cloak and Dagger pitch that I've sort of been sort of slowly talking, or not slowly, but low key sort of
Kind of seeding it.
talking about, yeah, seeding a little bit with editors and stuff. That
Sure.
would be great to get to, which is, it's not really a reimagining of Cloak and Dagger, but I think taking them in a different direction from what we've seen in the past. That would be really interesting.
No, I'm all about it. I mean, very early on, the New Mutants had some crossover adventures with Cloak and Dagger. So you doing New Mutants now and then moving to Cloak and Dagger. I mean, the synergy there makes sense, right?
Yeah, there's no thought that I'll actually get to do Cloak and Dagger, but
Sure.
it's on my list.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, and obviously, like I said, Spider-Man. In terms of creators, I'm glad I get to work with Declan Shelby finally.
Yeah.
Pepe Larraz, who did most of Extermination, I would love to work with again. He was a lot of fun to work with.
That book looked amazing.
Yeah, I don't want to say things, but
No, I mean, it was you guys, right? It was your words, his art. No, that
yeah.
book, like I said, it was my favorite book of that year.
Thanks. John Romita Jr. is someone who I've always been a huge fan of.
Sure.
My introduction to Daredevil was him and Daredevil back in the 80s. So John Romita Jr. is someone I would love to work with someday. And there's, I could probably list off about 100 artists.
Yeah, absolutely.
John Romita Jr. is sort of the guy who's at the top.
That's the grail right there.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, I listen, John. If you're watching, I think we would all love to read a Ed Brisson, John Romita Jr. book. So yes, absolutely, that would be great. So we talked about murder books just very briefly, and then you've done some of your own IP, right? But it seems to kind of gear towards like crime and stuff, right? Is that your big kind of interest outside of writing superheroes?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I had, growing up, had a bit of a juvenile delinquent streak. My dad was a cop, so it just was hand in hand, I think. I don't know many cop kids that don't sort of act out when they're teenagers.
Sure.
But yeah, I think when I was in fine arts in university, I never finished the program. And part of that was because halfway through, I discovered Elmore Leonard, and I've always been a big reader. I was mentioning, I think, before we came on here, that I've always had issues with insomnia, and one of the benefits of having insomnia, I guess, is you get to read a lot of books and watch a lot of movies.
Right.
And I picked up an Elmore Leonard book when I was in fine arts, and I read it in a day, and then I was so enthralled by it that I went back to the used bookstore and I bought every Elmore Leonard book they had on the shelf, which was like 15 books. And then just kind of kept hunting his books around other used bookstores around town. And I was going to school. I was at home just reading books because I was so absolutely just obsessed with Elmore Leonard that I stopped going to school for 3 weeks, a month.
Oh, wow.
And I went back, and it was just, I missed so much. And I was dating a girl who just graduated fine arts, so I was starting to see what the job market looked like for folks in fine arts.
Right.
Realized I didn't need to keep racking up student loans to be broke. Anyway, so yeah, Elmore Leonard became like a huge influence for early on, sorry. And through him, and really Richard Stark, that's like writing as Richard Stark, Jim Thompson, Charles Wilford, later on Richard Price and George Pelecanos, Carl Hiaasen, et cetera. So I became just a giant fan of crime fiction. I'm a huge fan of like a lot of the 70s sort of Dog Day Afternoon, Straight Time, and President Eddie Coyle, all those other films.
Right.
A lot of the Italian stuff too, which some of the Italian stuff can be a little bit silly, but it was like sort of after the spaghetti western started showing up, we started doing things like
back. So yeah, it's always just been a thing I've been kind of obsessed with in literature and film, and doing them in comics. Just there's not a ton of crime comics. Obviously, there's Edward Baker doing crime,
right?
But it's crime comics are kind of a hard sell.
For sure.
So yeah, Murder Book was just a thing where I had wanted to sort of break into industry, or I wanted to break into industry. I've been trying to pitch myself as an artist and a writer, and getting nowhere. And then I decided at one point back in 2010 to stop. I stopped pitching and just started working on Murder Book, and it was largely writing stories for myself. I was working with other artists. We're drawing them, but I was writing for just an audience and me, and trying to do the kind of books that I wanted to read.
Right.
It seemed to resonate with people because it ended up getting garnering attention. Dark Horse picked it up, and then it directly Murder Book is what led to me getting some work at DC back in the day, and then eventually at Marvel.
So, I mean, it seems like you have your hands full working at Marvel. You seem pretty busy. Do you have any kind of IP stuff in the tank, you think? Anything you'd like to revisit?
I'm currently writing a couple more Murder Book stories that I'll be posting online shortly. Adam and I keep talking about getting back to the violence at some point. When and how, I don't know. It's trying to get our schedules to line up. I do have a creator-owned thing that I am about to pitch. We were going to start pitching it right when all this stuff went down.
Sure.
And obviously, no one's looking at pitches, and we didn't want to send in a pitch while everyone's on pause.
Right.
And that's I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of like a modern day fantasy / sci-fi thing that I'm working on with Damien Cosero, who I've done quite a bit of stuff. He did one of the Murder Book stories called The Orchard.
Okay.
He worked on Iron Fist. He did issues 12 through 15 of Iron Fist. They did a few issues of Old Man Logan, and we worked on a few things together. I'm trying to think. He did an issue of Contagion on Marvel as well. But he and I have worked together probably since about 2005, off and on.
Okay.
We did a book at Boom called Cluster, which is a sci-fi thing. But so he's a guy I've always wanted to do sort of a bigger creator-owned thing with. And so when I came up with this concept, I kind of roped him into it. And, I think during this downtime, we're going to slowly just keep plugging away at it, and we'll pitch it around and see who's willing to take it, and if no one is, then we'll probably try and find some other way to get it out there. But I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty happy with it.
Sure.
It looks great. It's a really fun idea, and so I think
I think we're all looking forward to that. So now here's something I think is interesting. When you look at some of the books you do, a lot of times you end up in these writing partnerships, right? When you guys did Uncanny, it was like you, Rosenberg, and Thompson.
Right.
Now we've got New Mutants, and it's like you and Hickman. I at least for me, I've always looked at it when you're writing comics, you're sort of the director and the scene designer and everything, right? So when you start mixing with other personalities and other creators, what's that like in the development process?
Man, I don't know. Kelly, Matt, and I are all tight, so we talk all the time before Uncanny, and still. So that one was kind of like just doing a project with friends.
Sure.
So it was pretty chill. Obviously, you have to be willing to sort of compromise, or willing to sort of negotiate, I guess.
Right.
I want to say compromise. But I bet, with Matt and Kelly, it was a pretty smooth process. There weren't any big blow-up fights. That's not to say we didn't butt heads.
Sure.
Periodically. We certainly did. With Hickman, it was a whole other process where he had sort of a very brief description of what he wanted to happen in the issue, and then I took it and expanded it out. He left me a bit of latitude for who was on the team as well.
Right.
And we went back and forth, I'm not saying we went back and forth on who would be on the team.
Right.
And then I sort of did an outline, and then I did a first draft script, and then he came in to do the second draft script.
Right.
So it's a lot less collaborative, I think, than what I had with Matt and Kelly,
Right.
where I was picking up from an idea that he had and working with it. But yeah, those are the only two times that I've done sort of collaboration, and I'll be honest, it's not my preferred way of working.
Sure.
I kind of like working by myself.
Fair.
I think like I'm pretty easygoing, I think, but also I do find sometimes that I do get frustrated working with others. Just I don't know how to really get into it, but I always feel like you get a sort of a pure project, purer product,
Right.
when you have like as few voices in it as possible.
No, that very reasonable. So how did you get kind of pulled into this like Dawn of X, this relaunch for the X titles?
It was Hickman sent me a message, just asking if I wanted to come in and co-write that issue of New Mutants with him.
Right.
And sort of, so we were on the same page, and then eventually take over the series after he finished the New Mutants in Space story that he wanted to tell with Sunspot. Largely, he had a Sunspot Cannonball thing he wanted to do.
Sure.
And then he was going to hop off the series, so he brought me in early, so just set me up to take it over.
Okay. So he had this one little mini series, like this basically a mini series, and but obviously New Mutants an ongoing, so he's like, okay, we're gonna add this all to Ed. Ed's got it from here.
Yeah, basically that was it. He had, he's a big fan of Cannonball and Sunspot.
Sure.
I think they're both darling to him, and so he had something he wanted to do with them. Something he needed. I think he wanted to say with those characters. And then they wanted to use that to launch an ongoing.
So I'm from that generation that came into comics, like reading comics right around the time of like Liefeld doing like X-Force, stuff like that. So seeing something like Boom Boom in the book again, that's awesome, right? So when you guys were putting back together that team of like, with the New Mutants, like how did you decide like, okay, we need these characters, we're going to have some of the original guys, we're going to have some of these newer guys, like what was the idea there?
Well, what we had to do is initially it was going to be the 4 space issues, and then I would have come in on issue 5 to do their adventures, but there was some delay, so I had to do some issues in between.
Right.
So I couldn't use the core
right
Mutants team. But coming in, one of the things when I started reading comics, I started when I was growing up, I read New Mutants.
Sure.
And X-Force with Cable and Boom Boom and everyone else. I'm gonna cough. Hang on one second.
That's
sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
And so largely the core New Mutants team wasn't available to me in those issues.
Right.
And we were going to do. I was going to do a grounded story that originally actually started. It was going to be something else. It became what it was. And for me, I think the New Mutants is the thing I liked about the New Mutants growing up is it felt like these were the next X-Men, right? It was
right.
Like
yeah.
Then you could be there on the ground floor with them.
Sure.
But it's been what 30 years.
Yeah. Yep.
So I like the idea of them evolving.
Sure.
The one thing that's always kind of stuck in my craw a little bit is that we have new classes, with sort of Gen X, and then with the new X-Men.
Right.
That always get kind of stuck.
Right. Yeah, it's like this failure to launch kind of deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I want to do is sort of elevate some of the other younger mutants up a little bit.
Sure.
Armor in particular is one that I'm always interested in using her.
She's a great character.
Boom Boom, I had her in the X-Force series I did last year.
Right.
And I found that Boom Boom was an incredibly cathartic character for me to write. So I definitely wanted to include her, and then Glob. Glob's one of my favorite characters to write, so I'll stick him anywhere I can. but yeah, I just wanted to sort of integrate. I think going forward, like the who the New Mutants are uh, will slowly change, and it'll largely still be that core of original New Mutants.
Sure.
But I want to bring in other characters to work with them, sort of usually mission dependent.
Right.
What's going on in the book.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think we're going to see more of that, like characters we're not used to seeing on the team come in.
Right.
They may only be there for a few issues. I kind of like the idea that the team can evolve, like we can keep a core
Right.
cast.
Yeah.
But also, just we can have characters coming in and out as we need. And I think that I want to do is I think one thing that I see sometimes that I'm trying to fight against is I think it's hard to introduce new characters.
Sure.
Because what happens is creators will introduce new characters, then the next creator to come on a series has their characters they want to introduce.
Right.
So the ones introduced in the past fall to the wayside, and I'm trying to fight against that a little bit by using characters like Maxine and Manon, who are two characters I introduced in Stark Nation. I'm using them throughout New Mutants.
Right.
They're not necessarily main or major characters, but they will be used quite a bit throughout there. I brought Trinary into an upcoming issue, and so yeah, again, it's just really making New Mutants be about all the New Mutants, like all
right.
It can involve in Gen X, it can involve in new X-Men, it can involve newer characters who've been introduced since the last class that we had.
For sure. No, I mean, and I think that is the best idea I've heard, because like you said, with New Mutants, it really felt like, okay, these are the next X-Men, and then it was sort of a failure to launch, and then you got Generation X, and it was same deal, like, you got Mondo and Skin, and the rest, and same thing, failure to kind of launch. And so the idea that you're bringing these characters back, and kind of giving them their time and the due that they're kind of owed at this point, I think is probably the best idea I've heard for those characters.
Let's hope. Yeah, we're trying to do new and interesting things with them as well. I think, like, lots of stuff playing with Mondo. I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. He was my favorite Gen Xer, so
right.
that's great.
It is weird how little he was in Gen X.
Right.
But people still,
He's just a cool character, right? Like,
yeah.
So yes, him coming back around, that, especially because when Generation X was first out, I was, I'm a much younger person, have kind of different perspective on the world, but now being like a grown up and reading it, like, it's just, there's a little bit of nostalgia there. It's a different experience, but it's still really rewarding. So so you are a writer in the modern age of comics, right? You write in 2020. If you could move back in time and be a creator in, we'll say the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, would you write comics at any other time in history?
Yeah, I don't know. There's part of me that would like to go back if I had the opportunity.
Sure.
To write sort of around like the launch of Image, that era.
Sure.
Which I know is not really considered. There was a lot of dreck coming out around that point, but I think there was also so much excitement around it back then. Like, I remember how excited everyone was at the comic shops.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that I think that as bad as a lot of this stuff was, I think that we're seeing a lot of the staying power of the ideas introduced back then. Like, a lot of the characters who were introduced back then are sort of not, are becoming major characters at the Marvel, DC, or whatever.
Right.
I think it would just be a fun time. It just seems so exciting, and so many new ideas are being introduced, even if a lot of them didn't stick.
Sure.
And there's something about that that's really appealing to me.
And honestly, I think we're seeing a lot of nostalgia for that period now, which is great, because like I said, that's kind of the era when I came into comics. And but I mean, you've still got Spawn, you've still got Savage Dragon, like a lot of those characters that kind of came out at that time, and there are new readers finding them now too, which is really good.
Sure. And that was the era, I think, for myself, that was the era where I realized that I could just self-publish and I could create my own stuff.
Sure.
I didn't necessarily have to live in New York to make comics, which, being a Canadian, it felt like it might be tougher by not being in the United States, so
Right.
sort of breaking the comics. And when Todd McFarlane came out and sort of just blew the doors off the industry, it was just being a Canada was super excited. I wanted to, I wanted to be Todd McFarlane.
Sure.
And, so yeah, it's for me that's just like it was an exciting time, and it would have been cool to be part of it. And, yeah.
So that was actually kind of my next question. I think when, at least for some of the artists and writers I know, when they're getting started, there are creators that they sort of emulate or guys that they kind of want to be like. And it sounds like for you, like Todd McFarlane was kind of that influence for you.
Yeah, Todd McFarlane and Frank Miller could have had a baby. I would have wanted to be that baby. But that was when I first sort of really started trying to produce comics. So those are, I think, the two biggest influences.
Okay. Let me ask you this. And I know you said a lot of it was self-published out of your backpack. Is there any way to find that stuff now?
Oh God, I hope not. A lot of the stuff that I originally started doing. So I started doing like really bad superhero comics.
Okay.
And then pardon me. When I hit college, I really got into a lot of the Fantagraphics and Drawing Quarterly type stuff. So I spent quite a few years doing sort of, navel gazy autobio comics, like very much in the sort of Chester Brown, Joe Matt sort of vein
Right.
of things, and some just weird absurdist stuff that was really my Daniel Clowes, Dave Cooper sort of love coming through. So yeah. But so it's funny if you try. Hopefully you can never find any of my comics from that era. But if you do, they're kind of all over the place. It goes from weird like sort of image, first wave image knockoff stuff.
Okay.
To weird navel gazy stuff about breaking up with my girlfriend of 2 years and how depressed I was after that sort of stuff.
Right. Now I have a goal. I'm gonna go try to hunt this old Ed Brisson stuff out.
Best of luck.
So let me ask you this, and this is something I've always thought about. So I grew up in New Jersey, right? We're right there by New York, and I have family there, and we spent a lot of time there. And so growing up reading Marvel comics, like my neighborhood and my city was always sort of represented, right? Like, oh yeah, Spider-Man's swinging around Queens. My aunt lives over in Astoria, right? As a Canadian, right? Is it weird picking up comic books and it's all set kind of in like New York City, and then follow up to that is you've written Wolverine at this point, right? Like he is the comic book Canadian, right? What's that like? I mean, do you ever like slide in like Tim Horton jokes or things like that when you write?
I did put in a coffee crisp thing in Old Logan because I had an issue where he's hanging out with Alpha Flight.
Sure.
It's Puck a bag of coffee crisp chocolate bars.
Sure.
It's called Coffee Crunches in the comic for so we don't get sued. But yeah, it was weird. It wasn't weird. It was normal. Like in Canada, we're inundated with American media.
Sure.
We don't really, beyond Degrassi, there's not a ton of Canadian shows. We don't see ourselves represented a lot.
Sure.
In media as a country. And when we do, it's usually by someone who's never been to Canada.
Right.
And it's always really upsetting. I'll never there was one issue of Alpha Flight, and this came later, where who was it? I can't remember. A couple of the characters go to the warehouse district of British Columbia.
Sure.
Which is kind of like saying the warehouse district of Texas. Like, it's not.
That's not a place. That's not a thing that exists.
It's. I don't even know how you would figure that.
Right.
It's a very large place. There's not it's like saying a warehouse district in the state. I maybe got warehouse cities. I don't know. But it's that's just sort of just one example. You
Sure.
see that where like folks haven't been to Canada, and when they do, it's such a weird understanding of what Canada is, I guess.
Sure.
So, but like seeing things in New York, it's not weird just because we're so used to it from TV and such.
So when you do get to do characters like Wolverine, who is, or you know, even if one day you wrote an Alpha Flight book, could you see yourself like really, really Canadian? Is that that's not even a word, right? You can't verb Canada. But would you put a lot of like Canada into it, if that makes
Sure,
sense?
I do that, or like I did that with with Old Man Logan, and just even like little things, I don't think specifically I did this, but just as an example, like I would have him say washroom instead of bathroom, right?
Right.
It's just what we say, pop instead of soda.
Sure.
So yeah, I definitely do that. It's funny because periodically I would have to push when I was writing Old Man Logan. I would have to push back against notes to say no, like this is what we would say.
Sure.
Canada. But yeah, so I try and do that. I try and use a lot of Canadian locations. That's why in our run on Uncanny Avengers or Uncanny X-Men, sorry, that Matt Kelly and I did, the everything happens in Quadra Island, which is an island off of the coast of BC.
Right.
I think I put one of those islands in Batman and Robin Eternal when I was working on that.
Sure.
Locations in BC. I think I've used Vancouver and Iron Fist. Vancouver's been in Old Man Logan. PEI was in. What did I put PEI into? I can't tell. I put Nova Scotia into Old Man Logan as well. So I try and use a lot of Canadian locations.
Sure.
Also, just like if it fits with the character, it works. Like
right.
And I don't like I do as much as I appreciate all the New York locations that I grew up with. It does feel like heroes should be moving out of New York as much as possible, if not
right.
like a home base, but at least getting out of there.
Sure. Not a lot of room to stretch the arms there in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like when possible using locations that we don't normally see.
No, yeah, that's great. My wife's from Buffalo, and so no offense to Buffalo, I love that city, but it is basically Canada.
Sure. We grew up actually with Channel 29 from Buffalo was our big.
Oh, see, there you go. Yeah.
Watch, yeah.
So I got a very quick rundown with like Tim Hortons and Swiss chalet sauce, and it's just like all dressed potato chips. Family Day. My wife tells the story about trying to go to Canada to go to IKEA on Family Day, and everything's closed. It's just not a holiday we have. So.
But it's actually only a new holiday here, like within the last 10 years, I think.
Okay.
It was just Canada. I realized that we didn't have a holiday between New Year's and Easter, I guess.
Okay.
So they wanted something to break up the monotony in the middle. So yeah, Family Day was born. It's called. It's not Family Day in every province. So I think here in Halifax, in Nova Scotia, it's called Heritage Day.
Okay.
It's something like that. But yeah.
I love how this went from Canada or from comic books. So let's just talk about Canada for a little bit.
Hey, you got me here, so I'm down for it.
Do you do a lot of like the con circuit? I know you mentioned you'd done a show here in Florida last year, but I mean, do you kind of do the conventions and such?
Yeah. So just before this all went down, I was at C2E2.
Oh, cool.
I've done, I think in the past I've done upwards of like 13, 14 shows a year. I'm trying to cut back to about 4 to 5 shows a year, maybe.
Sure.
So yeah, I do shows, but like I'm not a huge fan of traveling, to be honest.
Okay.
And it's like I've been doing this. I started going to conventions in 2004, I guess.
Sure.
And so it gets a little bit tiring.
I can see that for sure.
I try to do about 4 to 5 shows a year right now is my hope.
So this is a question I had asked Matt Rosenberg, and since you guys are friends, I'm going to ask you the same question, and I'll tell you his answer as well. So, what has been your weirdest convention experience? For him, he signed a baby, and then a lady said, "Hey, I need you to sign my arm because I'm going to get your signature tattooed on me," and he's like,
right.
"Please don't do that. That's weird."
Uh-huh.
And she's like, "Oh no, I'm just joking. I just want you to sign my arm." And then the next day, he showed up with the tattoo.
Awesome.
So there's a lady just walking around with Matt's signature on her.
I have not had anything like that, to be honest. Everything convention-wise has been pretty chill. You know, you periodically will get people who are not happy with something you did in the story. And,
Like Killing Cable.
What's that?
Like Killing Cable.
Yeah, like Killing Cable.
Sure.
They'll come by and sort of get on your case about it. But
Right.
yeah, I haven't had really too many awkward con experiences. You know, now I know now that I've said that,
Right.
it's the floodgates will open. I think, you know, mostly is talking. The weirdest experiences I've ever had are just talking to people who are trying to break into the industry.
Sure.
The majority of them are great, but every so often you get, you know, some folks who just don't understand how things work. You know, I remember having to talk a guy down from publishing a series of Star Wars books.
Oh.
He had written,
Right.
and he couldn't understand copyright.
Right.
He felt that if Marvel could publish Star Wars comics, then there's no reason that he couldn't.
Sure.
I tried to explain it to him, but yeah, no dice there. He wasn't getting it. But yeah, no real weird experiences.
Okay. Well, Ed, I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's been awesome talking to you. If we do this again, you know, we'd love to have you back.
Yeah, sure.
Any parting words of wisdom for our followers?
I don't think I'm not that smart. No, just you know, just stay safe, I guess, and hopefully we get to do this in person down the line. And,
Yeah.
We get to you know, never use Zoom again.
Please, the sooner the better. With that said, guys, we'll be back at 3 p.m. today with comics artist Aaron Conley. Ed, thanks again for doing Coliseum Forum, and everybody, please stay safe, guys.
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay.
All right.
Did you kill our audio? Can they still hear us? So we'll be back at 3 p.m. today. Ed, you're awesome, man. Ed, thanks again. I'll be honest, I haven't been nervous about these except for you and Matt. Like, because I'm genuinely a fan of you guys. I read your comics. So.
No, I didn't come. Thanks a lot.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. You have a great day. Stay safe.
Yeah, you too. See you later.
Bye.